indeed read non-vampire books on occasion, and this video is about 4 of those books that I read last year, in no particular order. Let's begin. I've always been a fan of interpretations or adaptations of Alice in Wonderland, and that was before I actually got around to finally reading the 2 stories, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass and What Alice Found There, both by Lewis Carroll. And the fact that it took me this long to read those stories is... I don't think it would be disappointing, but it's about damn time. These 2 stories follow the titular character, Alice, and these are more or less a literary equivalent of a child's imagination. These are dreams that Alice is experiencing. They make almost no logical sense at all, even though she tries to find logic in them. She can't because they're dreams. Dreams normally are not logical, even though they stem from stuff that is logical. Which is, you would think that because I'm a very logic-focused person, that this would be contradictory to me, that I would not like it, it'd be hard for me. But as logical as I am, I do love and appreciate imagination and fantasy, and I really, really do love reading about stuff that is different. So reading through these stories was great because I got to see the origin of some of my favorite pieces of media and to see what they pulled from it, what they didn't, what they changed, what they didn't. It was a very interesting process to go through. Like, one of my favorite video game series is based on Alice in Wonderland. One of my favorite movies of all time is based on Alice in Wonderland, and no, it's not any of the Disney Alice movies. Those ones I don't like that much. And I have several books on my shelf that are also based on Alice in Wonderland. So it was very interesting to see what came from one story and what came from the other. As an example, like if you're looking at the original animated Alice in Wonderland movie by Disney, for example, it has Tweedledee and Tweedledum in it, but Tweedledee and Tweedledum aren't in Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. They're in the sequel story Through the Looking Glass. If you look at the more recent movies by Tim Burton, also under the Disney brand, the Jabberwock was in the first movie, I believe. I've only seen the first of the 2 movies. But the Jabberwock doesn't appear in Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, only appears in Through the Looking Glass. The Queen of Hearts is often referred to as the Red Queen, but the Red Queen and the Queen of Hearts are actually 2 separate characters. You know, the Queen of Hearts comes from the Queen of Hearts from the Pack of Cards, and that is in Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. But the Red Queen is actually the Red Queen chess piece from Through the Looking Glass. So it was really interesting to see all these differences and similarities and stuff. It definitely gave me a greater appreciation for what I already enjoy. And that was what I was hoping it would do. It would have really been very disappointing to me if I read this book with these 2 stories in it and I was like, dang, I didn't like that. Like, it wouldn't have taken out my enjoyment of the stuff I already liked, but the fact that I really enjoyed those stories when I read them just enhances my favorites even more. This book actually is my 3rd of only 3 5-star books from 2020. I read this towards the end of 2020, and it's just... the stories themselves were written really well, and the particular edition I have, where you have so many illustrations in it that are both stunning and simplistic at the same time, it was a very enjoyable read. And then there was another version of it that I also found at my store that was like a very limited printing version from another publisher. So of course I picked that up too. It's like, I'm normally not one to pick up more than 1 copy of a book or a story. I love Lewis Carroll's stories about Alice way more than almost anything else, so it's one of those rare exceptions that I make. And now we're gonna jump off that and talk about one such book that is based on Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass, and that is A Blade So Black by L.L. McKinney. I originally said in like June or July that I would do a review video for this book, And I never did, because I want my individual review videos to focus exclusively on vampire fiction, so consider this video to be the review for this book. The titular character, Alice, who is actually, I believe her name is actually Allison, but referred to as Alice for short, and she begins the book on the run. She runs away from her mother because she's distressed about the sudden death of her father. And then she ends up getting attacked by this monstrous dark beast that no one else can see but her. She is rescued from said beast by a human-like person. I say person, they're not human. They look human, but they're not. Named Addison Hadda. And Hadda recruits her into this group of dreamwalkers. Dreamwalkers are humans who are capable of seeing and destroying the nightmares. The residents of Wonderland can destroy the nightmares too, but only on a temporary basis. It is the Dreamwalkers that are capable of using their muchness, as Addison Hadda called it, to forever destroy said nightmare. The only person in the real world who knows that Alice does this is her best friend Courtney. And even then, there are some things that happen in the book that, like a birthday party, for example, Courtney's birthday party, where Alice turns out to be late because of her Dreamwalker duties, and, you know, she and Courtney have a bit of a scuffle over that. This book is written by a black author, and the protagonist herself is black. I love how unapologetic it is at telling what the reality is for a black person in America. It's not as graphic or anything, or it doesn't shove it in your face, but it's just subtle things that it's like, you know, if you're someone who isn't, that you've never experienced this, but you're seeing this through the character's eyes. Her mother is really overprotective of her, not only because of the death of her father, but also because at some point in the book there is a shooting that occurs, and it's never shown right on the page because it happens off page. But her mother becomes super overprotective of her because she doesn't want Alice to go out somewhere and not come home because she's been killed by someone. And when I was reading this was around the time in the summer when these Black Lives Matter protests and stuff were still going on in their fullest, and all the stuff that was going on during that time. And it was, I mean, this book was originally published a couple years earlier. It was kind of scary how much similarities it had to what was currently going on at the time, which I suppose in a sad way it kind of goes to show that some of this stuff doesn't really change. Which it's upsetting, it's unfortunate, but it's true. There is a little bit of a romance in this book. It doesn't really come into closer to the end of the book. I felt it was deserved. I thought it was nice, and Addison Hadda, can I just say Addison Hadda is a wonderful character. I now know where he was pulled from after reading the Lewis Carroll stories, and it was just like the author made him he's a badass. I just gotta put that out there. He doesn't seem like that at first, but by the end of the book you're like, huh, he's quite something. I gave A Blade So Black 4 stars on Goodreads. I think I gave it 4 or 4.5 on the Storygraph. The only reason why I did not rank this book as a 5 is because I have a very strong inkling that the second book is going to be better, because it's a trilogy, it's a series. So I might end up adjusting that rating depending on how I feel about the second book when I finally get my own copy to read it. Also, if you're one of those people that really doesn't like it when young adult books focus a little too much on the academia side of things, you don't need to worry about that here. It's there. There's references to school stuff, but like you're very rarely in a school environment in the book. Most of the focus is outside of that, which I personally really appreciate. Elantris by Brandon Sanderson. This book surprised me. This book really surprised me. It is an epic fantasy novel that originally was just one novel. It will become a series. There is a sequel story that Sanderson will be working on in the near future That's what he says anyway. I mean, he writes so many books, I have no reason to doubt him. This book was, what was it, his 8th or 9th book that he wrote originally, but it was the first one he got published. And your focus is on a city just outside a place that was once a very holy city, a city of light, a city of immortals. And then this thing would happen to someone in the city in which they would suddenly become like a god. You know, their skin would turn very, very bright and white. They would have golden, shimmery hair, you know, all of that. And then they would get shipped off to Elantris, where other similar people were. It was considered to be a very big blessing. It was a very big thing. You start the book 10 years after something changed all of that. Something changed it, and now every time that event occurs, instead of making them like immortal deities, they are like undead beings. And they're not the type of undead that like feeds on the brains of people or anything. They're not zombies. They look sickly, they look ill, and they get shipped off to Elantris again this time too, but more so just to get them away. And people don't know what caused this change to occur, what caused this former blessing to now become a curse. And one of the 3 characters that you follow is someone who is subjected to this curse right at the start of the book. So you are following him, who is the former prince of the town outside Elantris. You are following the woman who would have been his wife, who is a princess from another nation. And through her story, you're getting a lot of political intrigue and dealing with the very much the political side of things. And then you have a religious zealot from yet another nation who has come to indoctrinate the nation to their religion so that the leader of the nation that he comes from doesn't destroy the city. You know, the whole point is to amalgamate it into this massive empire. And through him, you're dealing with some of the political intrigue stuff, but most of it has to deal with the religion itself and exploring that and exploring the fanatics from those who are just following it, what it means to follow a religion. Do you really believe in this? Do you believe in that? All 3 characters, they're intertwining but very different storylines. It was very interesting how Sanderson weaved them all together. And I saw some reviews online before I read this book, and they said that this is Brandon Sanderson's worst book, and yet it's still a very highly rated book. And I'll agree with this one reviewer that I read. It's like, if Elantris is considered Brandon Sanderson's worst book published so far, then boy am I in for a treat when it comes to the rest of his books. Oh my god. I didn't feel like it dragged on too long. That was one thing I was concerned about. There were moments where I thought maybe it could potentially drag, but then it started to pick up right at the point where I was starting to think it might start dragging, so it didn't quite get to that point. I gave it 4 stars on both Goodreads and the Storygraph, I believe. It is a very good book. I really enjoyed it. I look forward to reading more of his books. I really do. This was quite the treat. And for the final book I'm going to talk about in this video is Kindred by Octavia Butler. Boy, does this book hit hard. Very, very hard. Kindred is the story of a woman who is black. Her husband is a white man. And somehow she gets thrown back in time to sometime in the 1800s, I think, to a plantation. And this keeps going on over the course of the story where she gets sent back. Something happens that nearly kills her. Instead of her dying, she gets teleported back to her current time. By current time, I'm referring to like when the book was published, like in the 1970s. Not now, the 70s. And she gets through increasingly more challenging things every time, and then her stay in the past every time is also longer and longer as time goes on as well, to the point where she begins to wonder if she's actually ever going to return home. If you're trying to read this book purely for the time travel aspect and all that stuff, you're probably going to be disappointed. I will say that right now. This book, the time travel aspect is more of a vehicle to help tell the story that the author wanted to tell. It's not meant to be a time travel sci-fi story. It's just part of it. The real focus of this book is on racism, it's on slavery, it's on discrimination, microaggressions, all sorts of different stuff. And it showcases the brutality of the reality of the people of that time, while at the same time not throwing it in your face. It sounds weird to say that, but it doesn't, I mean it when I say it doesn't shove it in your face. It's just a reality of theirs, right? By the time you hit the end of the book, when you hit the epilogue, I did not realize how many emotions I had tied to this book until I hit that point, and then I actually got teary-eyed. I actually started to cry a little bit, and that is very difficult. Very rarely will a book actually make me tear up or cry. Very rare. But this one did, because I was just so happy, so thrilled that the protagonist was no longer going to have to suffer through what she went through in the book anymore. It was done for good. She suffered from it, not just physically, but emotionally as well. And she does have, by the end of the book, she does have some physical wounds, some a little severe, but it was very interesting. If you wanted to focus on it, you could poke some holes through it if you really wanted to. But the whole point of the book was to talk about the reality of racism in America in the 1800s. So I leave that up to you to determine that, but personally, I think it came across really well. I really enjoyed it. I might end up rereading the book again in the near future just because of... It was hard-hitting, but it had some really important lessons in it. And I don't remember everything when I read a book sometimes, so going back through it again later would probably be good. I think I gave it 4 stars. This book convinced me that I should read more of Octavia Butler. And I definitely, later on down the line, going to pick up more of her books. Alrighty, that was 4 books I read in the latter half of 2020 that were non-vampire books that I wanted to talk about. What do you guys think? Have you read any of these books? What do you think of them? What do you think of my opinion of them? I would love to hear what you think in the comments below. And with that, I would like to thank you for watching this video today, and I will talk to you next time. Bye!